right now, but if I find, shall I share with you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah al-aliyyil azim. Alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Allahumma akhrijni min dhulumat al-wahm wa akrimni bi nur al-fahm. Allahumma aftah alayna abwaab rahmatik wa anshur alayna khaza'in ulumik bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahim. One of the important discussions in meta-ethics is ethical relativism, and this is a very important discussion from the time of ancient philosophers. This was discussed up to now, whether moral values are universal or not. Those who believe in ethical relativism, they have different versions. Inshallah, we'll talk about it. But if you want to simplify, they say there is no single true morality. There is no single true morality. Or there is no single most justified morality or action. So either truth, or if they cannot reach truth, to be most justified, are not limited to one option. You can have more than one, not every. Some people think relativists say everything is correct, everything is true. No, they don't say everything is true. They say there is no need to have only one truth. There is no single true or most justified morality. But not that everything works, everything is acceptable. This idea became very popular in the recent centuries when people were traveling, especially when the Western, some certain Western countries had their colonial troops going to different countries, different continents. They came across lots of varieties of customs and beliefs and moralities. So it was very much rising that there is no single true morality for these people, especially some people who were more considerate, more careful. They tried to say we shouldn't say our morality is the only one which is true. Look at these people, for example, in this part of Africa or Latin America or Asia, or in the North Pole, for example, Eskimos. They have their own ideas, their own moralities, and we should respect them. So awareness of great diversity in moral beliefs, moral practices, moral judgments of different nations led to increase in the number of people who believed in ethical relativism. But then, little by little, when more philosophical work took place, not just some anthropological and geographical work, when some more philosophical reflections took place, they realized that no, actually ethical relativism is not very strong, and even ethical relativists tried to restrict and reduce their claims, especially from second half of 20th century. You see this, that is ethical relativism very much in decline. When I was thinking of choosing a topic for my PhD, that is towards end of 1996, because I wanted to do something about moral philosophy, and I had my master dissertations on After Virtue by Alistair McIntyre. So I wanted to do something on ethics, and then Alhamdulillah, I remember I was in Sheffield, in the city of Sheffield, and I was in one of the bookshops. Blackwell's is a famous bookshops, chain of bookshops here in the UK. So I was checking books in the section on philosophy, and I came across a book on ethical relativism, which I found it very useful and interesting. And then I started, reading these and other things. So I decided to work on ethical relativism for my PhD. And then, alhamdulillah, after I finished the PhD, I also managed to publish it as a book. Maybe you have seen in the library of the institute. So, Ethical Relativism. This is my PhD on ethical relativism. And the book has different, sections, different chapters. Some of the discussions we had before today are from the last chapter of the book, but this discussion today is from the beginning of the book. Also, my supervisor, who passed away, he wrote also an introduction, a foreword for my book, which he finished in February 2001, about a brief review of the situation of moral philosophy in the West in the 20th century. So what I did was I studied ethical relativism in general and focused on two contemporary moral philosophers, Gilbert Harman and David Wong. These two are very famous in the field of ethics, and especially David Wong in the field of ethical relativism. Interestingly, David Wong did his PhD on ethical relativism, which is published as Ethical Relativity, and the supervisor was Gilbert Harman. I think the book was published in 1982 or 84, something like that. Many articles and entries of encyclopedias on ethical relativism were written by David Wong, and this is why I chose him. And Gilbert Harman was his supervisor. Both of them believed in ethical relativism, but Gilbert Harman restricted it, and David Wong restricted it even further. So even those who believe in ethical relativism, they have understood that they cannot hold very radical versions of ethical. They have to be more modest in their claims. Maybe I told you this, that when I first started serious work on, because I started work in Sheffield, but when I moved to Manchester, because I had my admission from University of Manchester, so I moved to Manchester, and when I was able to go to the University of Manchester, John Rylands, which is one of the best universities in the university libraries in the UK. So I used some databases, and this is now 1997. Now must be much better. So 1997, I used some databases and searched books, dissertations, articles on ethical relativism, and I found more than 1,300 books and articles. And I thought, if I'm going to read all these, and by the time I finish them, more will be produced, how much time I have to spend. And many times this can be repetitions. So alhamdulillah, I chose a very good approach, which I many times recommend to people. I decided to start with encyclopedias, not very general encyclopedias about philosophy and ethics, because these encyclopedias are always supervised by people of the field. So there are editors for each field, and they are some of the best, not necessarily the best, but some of the best people, best well-known people in the field. They may produce few pages on ethical relativism, for example, but these few pages are written by a person who is great in that field, and because they want to give a holistic and multi-sided, not just one opinion, view about that subject, it's very useful. Because, for example, this person maybe himself believes in ethical relativism or believes against ethical relativism, but when he's writing for the encyclopedia, has to give a comprehensive view. So they may mention the main points, the main theories, the main figures, and then in bibliography, they give some of the best, books and publications, and sometimes they have also recommendation for further reading. So I first started with these articles in encyclopedias, in philosophical handbooks, companions to different fields, like for example in Blackwell's as a companion to ethics. It's very good. So I read all these articles, entries, essays in such references on ethical relativism. Then I went to the bibliography and tried to find out what are the best. So alhamdulillah, after reading maybe 20, 30 things, I was very familiar with the whole literature. Because the first thing is literature review. You have to review it, and you have to do it as much as you are sure then you are not missing anything. You don't need to read everything, but you need to read enough so that you master what has been written. Unfortunately, sometimes people don't observe these kinds of techniques in research, and they try to read everything which is written about the topic. I remember, I don't mention details, but one center, they were working on one encyclopedia about one field. I don't mention details, and they were reading every book. They were making files for every topic based on each book. Huge work, thousands of hours, tens of people were working. Of course, it has lots of benefits, but my idea was different. My idea was that you don't need to exhaust every book written on philosophy, every writer, and then try to, choose the topics, and then for every topic bring all the references from these books. My idea was that if I was in your place, if I were in your place, I'd say, okay, in philosophy, there are topics which are certainly not controversial. Everyone says we have to include them in this encyclopedia. So we start with 200 topics. And then we write 200 articles about these topics. We get feedback. Then we increase it to 400 topics. Then we may need to increase it to 500 topics. But as a growth, not that you want to cover a net on all ocean so that even no single fish can run away. No, start with a little place, take something, work on it, let other people read and benefit and give feedback, and then grow. Anyway, these are different methods. So after reading some books and articles, then I didn't need to read everything, otherwise it would have taken years. Then I saw that everything is becoming repetitive. This has taken from that, that has taken from this, most of the things become repetitive. Then I started organizing my thoughts and choosing people that I want to work on, etc. And Alhamdulillah, despite my very, very heavy engagement with the community, and it was very difficult time at that time, in the end of first year, which normally a PhD student should give a report, I was not supposed to give report because I was from the beginning admitted for PhD, but many people are admitted for MPhil. At the end of the first year, they have to give a report. If report is satisfactory, they continue with PhD, otherwise they will be downgraded to MPhil. They will make a dissertation and finish, and then they have to apply for PhD again. Anyway, I volunteered to give a report to my supervisor in the end of my first year, and Alhamdulillah, he was very happy. And then everything else was just expanding. So I had the whole structure, everything of my PhD ready, and just when I was reading more, thinking more, I was expanding. It's not that I wrote one chapter and then another chapter, no. Like a child has a skeleton, and then this, flesh, muscles, come on this skeleton and grows. So it's an area which is very, very massive, and it's a very important topic. And then when the issue of globalization, it was close to the end of previous millennium, that the discussion about globalization was also very much increasing. Then globalization and relativism, all these things, were discussed. Some people are in favor of globalization and they are against relativism. Some people are not in favor of globalization and at the same time not in favor of relativism. Some people think that because we are not happy with relativists, so we must believe in globalization. Now, these are related but not the same thing. You may believe in universal values, but the question is whose values are universal. Maybe my values are universal, maybe your values, or maybe none of us. So there are two different things. What I did for ethical relativism, and I want to just give you a report, you can read the book because we cannot discuss all of it. First, I started with a historical report from chapter 2, because chapter 1 is something that inshallah we will discuss. Is about conceptual framework of the book, different types of relativism, terminology, etc. We will talk about it later. But then there is a discussion about history of ethical relativism from ancient Greece, great Greek philosophers, up to today. We don't discuss this here, but you can read in the book. Then I have a discussion about ethical relativism versus ethical absolutism. What is opposite to relativism? It's not something which is agreed by all. Here I have used absolutism. Some people just say non-relativism. I will mention why. So I try to explain that if you are not relativist, how you argue and how you explain diversity that exists, because the great strength for relativists is the diversity that we have. They call it fundamental. We don't believe necessarily fundamental, but they say we have fundamental differences. So how someone who is not a relativist look at these things and explains them? This is very important. Then I discussed the idea of Gilbert Harman and evaluated that. Then David Wong and evaluated that. And then I have a chapter about foundations of morality. This is a small breakdown of the book. In the discussion about ethical relativism versus ethical absolutism, I tried to mention any potential ground that can be used for relativism. And I have mentioned 11 potential possible grounds. Some are mentioned, some was theoretical. So I wanted to see how someone can argue for ethical relativism from every aspect and try to discuss them and say they don't prove ethical relativism. First of all, many of them, they have problems in themselves. But secondly, even if they accept them, they don't lead to ethical relativism as a philosophical view. And then I said, okay, maybe someone says these arguments are not working, but still maybe someone in future would bring an argument for relativism, which would be acceptable. If you say we don't have any strong argument for ethical relativism, it doesn't mean that it's not going to come in future. Therefore, this is why I have in final chapter tried to establish from origins, from the roots, ethical system, so that I say that it's objective and it is not relative. Then this is the constructive argument. Instead of just refuting ideas and arguments of relativists, if we can constructively argue that there are universal values. So let us start today with learning few types of relativism. One type of relativism is called descriptive ethical relativism. By the way, there are relativisms in other sciences and disciplines. We are not talking about them. We are talking about ethical relativism. We are not talking about relativity of Einstein. We are not talking about relativity of truth in general, although that is also an interesting topic. Some people say truth is always relative. I have discussed this in my book. But no, we are now focusing on relativism in ethics. So some people say what we call ethical relativism in a descriptive way. So descriptive ethical relativism. As you can guess from the term, descriptive ethical relativism means that it's not judging, it's just reporting. It's just saying that there are fundamental differences in ethics. It's description. There are fundamental differences, either from individual to individual or from culture to culture. Because one type of relativism is cultural, which says from culture to culture there are differences. So some say even from one individual to another individual. So we will discuss, inshallah, all of this. So descriptive ethical relativism says that there are fundamental differences in morality of individuals or cultures and nations and societies, etc. Some say all are different, all values are different. Some say some. So some are very radical, some are very modest. Some say some are different, some say all are different. Then we have normative ethical relativism and meta-ethical relativism. I consider it in this way. I say descriptive, then meta-ethical, then normative. What is meta-ethical relativism? It's a philosophical idea. This is something which is discussed in meta-ethics. It's a philosophical idea which is not just reporting. It argues that there is no single true morality, or there is no single most justified morality, either between individuals or cultures and nations. They argue that there is no reason that there can be no 2 or 3 correct views. For example, the first type just reports that during domestic wars in the United States, there was disagreement about slavery. Northern states supported abolition of slavery. They were against slavery. Southern states were in favor of keeping slavery. They had, farms, and they wanted, to use these slaves as labor, etc. And they had even war and fight between themselves. Descriptive one just reports, says, look how much they differed. Some said that slavery is right, some said it's wrong, and even they were happy to fight and be killed or kill. But meta-ethical relativism doesn't just report, says for the northern states slavery was wrong. They said it was wrong, and they were right that it was wrong. For southern states, slavery was right, was good, and they were true, they were right. None of them they made mistake. Something can be for this group okay, for another group not okay. Maybe people on 2 sides of a river can have differences, and both can be correct. Of course, as I said, they don't say every person who says something or does something, or every group, they are ethical, they are right. But they say more than one can be right. So this is very philosophical. Then we have normative ethical relativism, which says when you don't belong to that person's or that group's morality, you should not pass judgment about them. For example, if you are in northern states and you say slavery is wrong, okay, you are right, slavery is wrong for you. But they, in the south, they say slavery is good. They are also right. The normative says you must not judge about them. You must not say they are making mistake. Their morality is, wrong. Their practices are wrong. You must not pass judgment. You must not condemn them. You can only pass judgment on people who share with you the same moral approach. For example, another person who believes slavery is wrong, if he does slavery, then you can condemn him. And not only you should not pass judgments about them, you should not interfere, which is of course obvious. This is an implication of the first one. If I cannot pass judgment on them, then I cannot interfere. Let them do what they think is right. You cannot interfere. This is called normative, because it's giving norm. Normative ethical relativism. So there are 3 types. Most of people, maybe 99% of the people that I have studied, they use the first as the argument for the second and the second as argument for the third. They use as whole argument or as part of argument the diversity, the differences which are there. Lots of debates are there, for example, on abortion. They say, okay, we have such situation. Then from descriptive ethical relativism, they try to argue either alone or with added premises for meta-ethical relativism. And then they use meta-ethical relativism for normative ethical relativism. Most of people are like this. Most of the books are like this. From descriptive to meta-ethical, from meta-ethical to normative. So if you question and manage to refute descriptive ethical relativism, automatically the rest are cancelled. And if you manage to refute the second, then the third is cancelled. What inshallah we are going to discuss is, we are going to discuss each of them on its own, and also we say, okay, even if we accept, suppose we accept this, would this really lead to the second, to the highest version or not? Inshallah we'll discuss this in the next session, but please familiarize yourselves with this. I think I have a paper that must be available on ethical relativism in Farsi, and inshallah I will share you also the link so that you can read that as well. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Do you have any questions? My paper is نسبیت گرایی. I think مبانی و نماهای چیزی نسبیت گرایی نماها و مبناها I think. Yes. نسبیت گرایی توصیفی no that is the کلید واژه. نسبیت گرایی اخلاقی نماها و مبناها. You can find it in this link. Any question?
Assalamu alaikum.